who was deceased on Valley Avenue, Waller Place. Chief, first of all, I want to thank you for joining on this very important conversation about what happened um, on January the 6th, 2021 that transpired in the U.S. Capitol. First of all, I have a lot of respect for you over the years. I've had my issues with MPD, but I've always found you as a person from D.C. that understand, that has a sense of common sense, and also able to know, from an African American man growing up in the city, your background and how you're able to relate and help me and the community through several difficult situations. So when Mayor Bowser tapped you to become the chief, I was excited, and I don't really get excited that much. And so I'm happy to have you to be the chief, man. I just wanted to say that. So give me real quick, tell me a bit about you and your background and how you came to the ranks of MPD to become the chief of Washington, D.C.
Hey, thanks so much, council member, for allowing me to join to talk to some of our residents here. I started with the agency back in 1989. I was still a student at Spingarn Senior High School. I grew up over in Carver Terrace. DC is home for me, born and raised here in this city. Joined the department at a very young age, man, really to just change my situation. You know, I've told my story before. I mean, some people have heard it. You know, my background was rough, but my story is just one of many, you know, kids that have stories in this city. I just have a platform right now to speak on to kind of amplify that a little bit. But I've been able to rise up through the ranks of the department. I've served in 3 of the 7 police districts. I've been the just had a remarkable career, man. So I won't bore you with all the details about my bio, but I'm just happy to be here with you and happy to have the opportunity to talk to some of our residents.
Thank you. I think that's important to talk from a perspective. And I feel like you've always been fair. And no, we may not always agree on topics, but we're able to talk through it as men to figure out what the resolution is. And I feel like you've always been fair with me. So I think that the background is important. There were events that took place at the Capitol on the 6th of this month, a few days ago, that was very disturbing, as you know. I would like to get a better understanding. I know the community would like to get a better understanding of MPD's involvement. For example, when MPD got involved, asked to get involved, under what conditions, and a brief explanation of what your jurisdiction was during that day and your role in that day.
Gotcha. Thank you. That's a great question. You know, a lot of people, I think this is very confusing for people who live in D.C., people who don't live in D.C., but a real quick history lesson, you know, as most people know, we got 3 branches of government. You know, we have our legislative branch that makes the laws at the Capitol, we have the courts, and then we have the Supreme Court, then we have the executive branch. And all 3 of those things operate independently. The thing about it is all 3 of those different entities have their own police departments. So the Metropolitan Police Department really has no jurisdiction over the Capitol Police. We don't have jurisdiction over Secret Service. We don't have jurisdiction over the Supreme Court Police. On that particular day, the Metropolitan Police Department's responsibility was to facilitate peaceful First Amendment assembly on the streets of the District of Columbia. Not talking about the mall, not talking about at the Capitol, not talking about what's happening at the Ellipse. That's all Park Police, that's Secret Service, that's U.S. Capitol Police. So my primary concern on the 6th was what was happening not just downtown, but also in our communities, because our communities are also very important. You know, when we have these national security events that occur in our city, there's still things that are happening outside of the walls of downtown. There are people that need police service. So I had the dual responsibility of making sure that our communities are safe and making sure that the area that we have responsibility for, which includes BLM Plaza and the like, that was also covered. We ended up being called into action by the United States Capitol Police on that day because, and I just just finished reviewing some very disturbing video of how this really kind of unfolded. But at the end of the day, the Metropolitan Police Department was called in to assist the United States Capitol Police, and I think that's important to note. The U.S. Capitol Police has a force of about 2,000 members, which eclipses, what they have in Prince George's County, what they have in Montgomery County. It's a very large police force, and we were called in to assist them on the day of this insurrection.
So, Chief, I know you heard some of my criticism. I was around and involved as a council member, getting a lot of complaints, pictures. I was even at one situation where we had Karan Hilton's mom. I had to meet with them, with the Office of Attorney General and some police officers, so they could see the footage of the incident that happened with their son up off of Georgia Avenue. And during that day, there was a rally in which escalated, in which pipe bombs were thrown, police assembled in full body gear and pushed the crowd back. And I sent a letter, I don't know if you read it or not, to the mayor, because I felt like there was a double standard on what happens in the black community every day with the gun recovery unit. If they even anticipate or think you got a gun on you, they're going to slam you on the ground, go in your car, do whatever they need to do to confiscate a gun from you. And I feel like the same intensity or level of intense policing wasn't happening as relates to those insurrectionists, is what I call them, at the Capitol that day. What is your response to my view of how I feel like black people were treated versus privileged white people in the district as relates to these two types of incidents and protesters, and what's been happening traditionally with Black Lives Matter protests?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, first of all, I can tell you, I'm not tolerating any police officers that will go out here and abuse our citizens. That's just not acceptable. That's first and foremost. There was a distinct difference between these the protests that we've seen in the insurrection. During the insurrection at the Capitol, again, that's an assault on on our democracy as a country. And the Metropolitan Police Department, again, not the entity that's responsible for the United States Capitol. So the Capitol could have, the Capitol Police could have went into whatever posture they decided to go in. There was a decision at some point that, this was the posture that they were taking with respect to how they were dealing with the protests that were scheduled for that day. And the Metropolitan Police Department had a posture for that day. Our posture for the Metropolitan Police Department, I can speak to ours, was that we notified and received services from the National Guard in advance of the insurrection. In addition to that, we notified and received mutual aid. We had officers from Montgomery County, Prince George's County, Arlington County, on the ground, the footprint within the District of Columbia, ready to go into action. That's very important to note, because those are resources that were put in place before we got to this point. When things started to unfold at the Capitol, by the time MPD was called in, things were already out of control. The mayor did not have the authority to dispatch anybody there. We basically had to be invited in by the United States Capitol Police. It would be the same thing if it was at the White House. We can't just go onto the White House grounds, deploy whatever we want to deploy. It's really an invitation or a call for help that has to happen. In other instances where we've seen uprisings that have occurred in our city, back in June when we had all the stuff going on then, the mayor can request from the federal government additional resources for the streets of D.C., be it National Guard, be it whatever those resources were. So because she has control over that area. So like I said, there's a distinct difference there. At the United States Capitol, when the police officers there responded the way they did, I think it's important to note, how when MPD got involved in the fight, we were very strategic about what we wanted to do. And part of what needed to be done, we had to restore order. We had to restore order in order for our democracy to move forward. In order for the vote to take place, MPD had to restore order. Now, mind you, and I've said this publicly, while MPD is dealing with this, one of the other things that's going on, 2 pipe bombs in a very short distance away were located. So now you got MPD being involved in a lot of things, a lot of things that could have went really, 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 really bad for us. So, like I said,
let me ask you this. Steve. How many MPD officers did you all deploy to the Capitol that day?
There were a lot. I don't know exactly what the numbers were, but there were several platoons of officers that ultimately responded, as well as some of our outside agency partners. There were a lot of people there.
And were any of them injured?
There were a number of them injured. MPD, we ended up with about 56 officers that were injured.
So I have a question, because I spoke to this earlier on my social media about this kind of duplicity as relates to the charges. From when you click on MPD's link, for one link on from the 6th, you see that all the charges seem to be unlawful entry. When you click on the charges from the Black Lives Matter protest preceding that, you see felony, unlawful felony assault police officer, felony riding. You see all these felonies. Can you speak to that? Because the public needs to know what's the distinction between this group, what's this group, and how they were charged, and what's the outcome of that.
So when you make a felony rioting charge, well, first of all, let me say, for the people who were arrested recently, a lot of those charges are being levied by the federal government. That's first and foremost. A lot of those cases will be our district court cases. But in order for us to make the charge of felony rioting, and this is what was happening in the previous protest, prosecutors were really pressing MPD. We had to be able to identify what specific individuals were doing in the course of rioting. What acts did they involve in? If you recall back to when we had the uprising in June, when a lot of downtown, a lot of Georgetown, a lot of places were destroyed right here in our city. Even in some of those instances with cases, we were not able to place felony rioting charges in all of those cases. But the distinct difference is when we are able to say, that this person engaged in riotous acts. At the Capitol, for example, when we started making arrest for curfew, at the time when these individuals were placed under arrest, we could not for sure say, hey, look, this person was in the Capitol, or this person did whatever. We know that we arrested them on the outside. So as they're going through like videos and stuff like that now, you see additional charges being levied against the individuals who they can identify. Well, this guy did this. This guy busted the window out. This guy stole a statue. So they can always, on the federal side, they can always make changes to or make amendments to the charges. They can always do a lot of that stuff, and I think you'll see a lot of that coming forward. And I just want to say this really quickly too. I got to give a huge shout out to the public, not just here in DC. We have received over, at my last count as of this morning, about 11:30, we've received over 17,000 tips. 17,000 tips from people who are looking at these videos, looking at these images, saying, I know that guy, I know that guy, I know this person. And that's hugely helpful. And what we're doing with that information, understand MPD is not the lead investigating body on these charges or for the individuals who are arrested. We're shuttling all that information over to the FBI, who's the lead investigating entity, specifically for the charges that are being levied. So we're helping them out with that pretty much is what we're doing.
So Chief, thank you for that. But I see some of the individuals you have on your website identified with unlawful entry. It's also evidence and videos that they bust glass out the window, climbed up into people's office, took stuff off of people's desks. You're talking about, this is the United States Capitol.
Absolutely.
One of the most sacred places in the world, right? And unlawful entry is so low as a charge. And I'm trying to get an idea from you when the MPD posted on the website, why wasn't it more serious charges put on the website from an MPD perspective?
Because a couple of things. One, MPD really didn't know what the federal government was going to charge. Again, the FBI was leading the effort. our initial effort was to really just to get the information out, to get the pictures out to people so that people could see who these individuals were. After we had our conversation, if you check it now, I think there's a mention on there that these individuals will be, prosecuted under federal statutes. And I don't know all of the different federal statutes that they plan on levying against them. Again, the FBI, the United States Attorney's Office, will be the ones placing those charges. But I think again, I'm very sensitive to how our community is viewed. I think as an African American male, certainly I have a role as the chief of police, but as an African American male, it's certainly something that I'm sensitive to. The effort again to get those pictures out was to get the public calling in, so that these people don't just get off without being held accountable for their actions. I think there should be significant consequences and penalties for that. But that's not my call. That's depends on what happens in the courts. That depends on what happens with prosecution. My responsibility is to make sure that we do everything that we can to get these folks in custody. So if it means that the Metropolitan Police Department, like we did on the day that we were called to the Capitol, our efforts to assist them means, hey, MPD do this or MPD do that. If the least that we can do is to help push images out to our officers in the field so that they're looking around, they happen to see this guy, that we could do something about that. It's about bringing these individuals to justice. Whatever they're going to be charged with, that's really kind of going to be on the courts.
And so let me back up for a minute. So the DC Police Department, FBI, Washington DC has more police and surveillance than probably anywhere in the world, right?
Yes.
And we knew that these individuals were coming. That means that you all had intel on the hotels they were staying in, the vehicles they were parked down Southwest. So we had intel on the tags on everyone. There was cars parked on the sidewalk. If any DC resident would have parked on the sidewalk, they'd have been ticketed and told. We knew the Airbnbs they were staying in, and so it's concerning to me when I hear and see posts that the FBI are searching for these individuals. We should already have the information as the local government and the federal government where these individuals are. Because most they drove, they even caught up, even in Virginia. So there should have been some coordination on the front end, not just trying to put stuff to social media, trying to get intel on individuals like these. People came out of nowhere. They had to use their credit card. They drove their car. I saw a car on MLK. Actually, I saw a video footage driving on MLK. I was with Sam Ford that day by the big shed when it rolled past. And so this basic information should already be gathered in pursuit of these individuals.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, here's the short answer. I mean, I wish it was like, TV, like, everything happens like that and we have them in 60 minutes. But I think you can see from the images that have been posted, you're exactly right. We have great images. You're exactly right. And there's a lot of footage that they'll be going through as they begin to make arrests on this. There are a lot of individuals that are known. There are warrants that are being applied for right now through the federal government. They've already taken some individuals into custody. But this is a national effort. This is not a DC effort. We got people, again, a shout out to the DC residents, because guess what? In all of this, one DC resident arrested in all of this melee. Nobody from the people for DC didn't fall for the banana in the tailpipe, and I appreciate that. That was huge. DC residents stayed home, which allowed us to focus on the things that we need to focus on. But now, when it comes to the investigative part, this is where the real work gets put in. The fight was the fight, but now the real work gets put in when you got to hold these individuals accountable for their actions. So that means sending U.S. Marshals and FBI agents to somebody's house that may live far, far away from here to bring them to justice for acts that they committed here in the District of Columbia. I wish we could have locked them all up that night. But the reality is, Councilmember, and I'd be lying to you, and again, if anybody, last time we had an insurrection in the Capitol was back in 1812. So I don't think there are many people who have experience dealing with insurrections, riots, etc. But all that being said, there's a very strategic posture that you have to take to ensure that things are safe for you as a law enforcement officer to do the things that you need to do. And first and foremost, the thing that we want to do is make sure that people are safe. I mean, could you imagine if I mean, or we already had somebody to die in there, but if more people had died as a result of police officers firing guns or guns being taken from police officers and used on other people, I mean, there were 11 Molotov cocktails that were recovered. If those had went on, I mean, this thing could have. I mean, it was a failure on a number of different fronts, but I'm just happy that we were able to get through that point. And now, as we work with our federal partners and community to do the real work of bringing these people to justice and making sure that the District of Columbia has a voice in that justice that's being brought forward, I think that's very important. We have a U.S. attorney here in the District of Columbia, acting U.S. attorney Mike Sherwin, that the District of Columbia residents can certainly reach out to with respect to charges that are being levied against the
Chief, real quick, you talked about accountability, right?
absolutely.
These individuals. There is a lot of allegations of the police department that was there, not MPD, but the Capitol Police that was aiding and abetting those individuals coming in. Would those individuals be held accountable as well?
I would like to think so, council member. I mean, I don't, and to be perfectly honest, I mean, I heard some chatterings about that, but it's not anything that I have seen myself. I like to think, and I know for a fact, I mean, there will be a significant investigation, probably at a congressional level on all of this stuff. And I'm sure that a lot of that stuff will come out, in the wash as they kind of peel through the layers of this stuff. But as they do that, any or any inappropriate actions by law enforcement officers, I'm sure that there will be some accountability. If it's for the Metropolitan Police Department, I can speak for us. I'm sure that there will be. But I can tell you from being there, I can tell you from once I made it to the command center and seeing it from that vantage point, that the Metropolitan Police officers, the things that they did in that building, the things that they did on the west front of the Capitol were nothing short of heroic. I've seen grown men crying because they've been involved in combat, they've been involved in a lot of things, but never experienced anything this terrifying in their life. But they were in the fight, despite the fact that we had wind blowing in our face, the CS gas, and all that stuff. People not properly protected with masks, because again, we're responding to a situation, trying to bring it under control. These officers' efforts, I mean, I am so proud of the actions of the Washington D.C. Police Department. I mean, my heart is overjoyed. I'm saddened by this, that all these things happen, but it could have been a lot worse, and I did not see our officers fold. We stood up, we restored the democracy for this country, and that's something to be very proud of as the history books are written. It's been a pleasure, council member, talking to you, man. Look, we could kick it after this offline or something at some other point, but I got to get out of here. I got another intelligence briefing that I got to go to, sir. So it's been my pleasure to talk to you, District of Columbia, sir.
I appreciate you taking this impromptu interview at the last minute to jump on to give some more information and clarity on what happened. And we will be following up with MPD and just the local jurisdictions of police departments to figure out what went wrong. We'll be
Absolutely. It's good to see you, sir. Take care.
all right. Peace.